Okay, so my name is Mark Appelman. I'm one of the sales engineers within SeedProcessing Holland for around 6.5 years now. And today I want to explain a little bit how we handle custom-made project requests within SeedProcessing Holland, to explain to you why we do this and how we do this. So today I want to talk to you about what I already said, why we have the sales process and the different steps we take in this process. That starts with, of course, understanding a request, aligning the scope, making plannings, of course making drawings like 2D flows, PNIDs, of course the budget, but also making 3D layouts, and of course a final proposal. Later on I will deep dive more into these topics, but first we start with why this sales process. As you can imagine, for us it's good to understand basically your needs. So often you come with a request to us or with a question or an issue, and then it's important for us to know, okay, it's not only the request, but most of the time a lot of things also important to know regarding the project. But also to align on timelines and deadlines. A lot of times our customers are fixed on a certain season, and they want to be operational before their season. And for us that's good to know that we can make a project planning to see, okay, if we start now, can we prepare and build everything on time before the season starts? But also check the budget. That's of course also an important topic. If we are not aligned on budgets, then it's difficult to get close to each other. Then we have to check, okay, can we remove certain machines or options from the scope to get more aligned on the budget. And also to explain to you what our proposal is about. So you know all the details, why we have certain parts in, why we maybe have certain machines in, all that kind of things. So the first step is to understand your request. And of course this nowadays can be done by multiple ways. Most often we do it by an online meeting, basically how we do it now, but we can also do it by a phone call or a face-to-face meeting if that's possible. So there are a lot of ways to do this, and most of the times before we have this meeting, you already shared your needs with us, and we have discussed it internally, most of the time with the sales manager, with the sales engineer, maybe with a process engineer if that's it's regarding drying or whatsoever. So we are well prepared to have a good discussion with you. And basically when we do that, we have that discussion, then we start aligning on the scope. So we define what is in the scope, what needs to be delivered. And this scope we write down in a document we call starting points. And the starting points is a document that can contain lots of different topics, starting from basic information of which scopes you want to process, which seeds you want to clean or treat or whatsoever. Of course, what kind of equipment or machines do we want to use? It's really important, of course. And what the options of the equipment will be. Of course, equipment specifications, capacities, all that kind of things. But also logistics. A lot of our customers do have, for example, all boxes or for input or output. And of course that needs to fit our equipment, so that's good for us to know, and so we can take it into account with designing a processing line. But we can also take into account, for example, routing in the building. If you say we have a supply route on the right side of the installation, and then we can design the installation accordingly. Both, for example, automation and controls, because we can make basic equipment with manual controls, with potential meters, for example, for speed control. But you can also make it fully automatic, meaning that everything is controlled by a central PLC, which you can operate by means of an HMI. And you can store all the settings you put in the HMI in a recipe, so the next time you want to process the same seeds, you can just say, okay, we load up a certain recipe, and then all the settings for all the machines are loaded, so it saves you a lot of setup times. So when we have aligned on the defined scope in the starting points, of course we share it with you, so you can also review that with your project team in order to get aligned on the scope. And when we have done this, most of the time we start with our project planning. What I said earlier, it's important for us to know, to check if the timelines of seed processing also fits the timelines of you, our customer. And then there are some dates that are important for us. That's the expected order date and the desired date to be operational. So most likely if you have one of those dates, then we can check, okay, you want to get a PO, then we can supply our equipment on a certain date. But if you say it's the other way around, okay, I want to be operational on a certain date because our season starts 2 weeks after, then we can plan backwards to see, okay, if we want to reach that date, we need to PO before a certain date, and then we know we have to do all the preparations before that date. So that gives a good overview of timelines. And this is how that would look like. So on the left side, we marked all the steps, what I mentioned earlier, from making starting points, but also making layouts, process flows, all that kind of things. Of course, it takes time. And this also has to be reviewed on at our customer side, so that takes some time. And then if we say, okay, we have prepared everything, we expect to have a PO on a certain date, and then we said, okay, we as SeedProcessing need to do some engineering. Of course, when we needed review moments with the customer. And when we're done with engineering, we need to start production, which also takes some time. Maybe some more lead items, if there are any in the project. Basically, this follows all the steps that we do as seed processing until we reach a certain date. Most of the time we call it the ready for shipment date. It's the day that the products are ready to be transported to your facility. So this gives basically a good overview on how long the whole project will take, not only production but also preparing on the sales side. And this is something for you to also take into account that most projects that are custom made, it's not off the shelf, so it takes a lot of time for seed processing to prepare, to discuss everything in order to get aligned on the project, to fit everything to your needs. So when we have discussed this planning, we agreed on the planning, then we start making some drawings. In this case, we start with 2D flow or PNID. That depends a little bit on the project it is. For 2D flows, normally we talk about cleaning projects, treating projects, and PNIDs, that's mainly for drying projects. So what's in these drawings? And 2D flows, we talk about machines. We put them in because then we can see, okay, well, how does the product flow going from one machine to another? Where's waste going? Where's the seed, good seed fractions are going? Are there any sensors in the line to measure high or low levels for box detection? But also logistics. Which containers do we use? Where do we put certain containers? How do we transport from machine 1 to machine 2? And where are the utilities? Where do we need power? Where do we need compressed air? All that kind of things. And I will show you an example after this. And we can also do this for drying projects. Then we call it a PNID, piping and instrumentation diagram. This is basically where we mention all the components like pumps, valves, heat exchangers, all that kind of things. But for that I will also show you an example later on. So here we have an example of a 2D flow of a cleaning project. Here you can see from, it's going from left to the right side, so from seed intake of the installation, how it is transported, in this case with a bucket elevator, to machine 1 or machine 2. And you can choose that based on the certain crop you are processing. And also you can transport from machine 1 to 2, or you bypass machine 1. All the waste fractions, as you can see here, all the red lines, and the good seed fraction is going to a silo, and the silo is connected to a vacuum transport system to transport all the seeds to the next one. And so you can go through the whole line and can exactly see, okay, what is going where do we put sensors, as you can see here, the green and the red, around HL, LL, low level, high level. That waste is going to certain waste belts. In the right bottom corner you can see all the containers that will be used and where they are used, so everything is marked from A till E, and then we put them in, so you can see which containers are used where. And then we also have on the top side with the red lines, it's the power connections. It's a little bit difficult to read, but so you know, for you to know, okay, we need certain requirements for this machine, for that machine, this machine. Also for you to prepare before we start installing all the equipment. Then we have the PNID, the piping and instrumentation diagram for drying equipment. So these are more technical, as you can see. So here we mention, you can see, starting here we have a heat pump. The heat pump supplies hot and cold water to our drying cabinets. In this case we talk about 6 cabinets. And so in all the piping between the heat pump and the drying cells cabinets, and there are a lot of components in the piping, so like valves, sensors to check all the temperatures, pressure, and that kind of things. And then from this line, separate connections to the cabinets. And so there is heating, there are also temperature sensors and are valves in order to regulate the process. And when we start making these kind of drawings, like the PNID or the 2D flow, this is also shared with you, so you can discuss that internally in your project team to review it, and afterwards to give an agreement to us. Okay, so this is will work for us, and then it's a go moment for us to proceed with process. So when we have shared the scope, the 2D or the PNID, the planning, and then we will make a budget for you. Of course, you would like to know, okay, how much will this cost, and does that fit our available budget? And that is something we share then with you. And if we agree on that, then we can proceed. If it's maybe too high, then we can say, okay, then we can maybe review some parts and leave that out of scope to reduce the budget. But if we agree on that, we start engineering in 3D. This basically means we translate the 2D flow for the PNID into a 3D layout. This is important because it shows the physical dimensions of the installation, so you have a good idea how big it will become. And if it will fit your building. Sometimes the installation can be quite high and we need to take into account certain heights or whatsoever. But we can also assist you with a building design if you maybe are planning to build a new facility. What we can do is we can load up the drawing of your architect, and then we can put in our machines to see, okay, if we talk about a certain amount of machines, will it fit, will doesn't fit, do we need to increase the size of certain rooms, whatsoever. And this is how that would look like. This is a 3D layout of the 2D flow I showed you earlier. So this gives another perspective from the 2D, so now you can really see the physical size of everything. It's roughly 27 meters wide and 5.5 meters high. So this is quite a big installation. But this gives you a really good overview of how everything would look like, how to reach certain inspection points or cleaning points. That's why we also put like operators into the drawing, so you can see where do you have to be, where do you have to clean stuff, where do you have to inspect stuff, where can we operate the line, where do I need to be with forklifts. It's very important to know where to take that into account. And we can also do that for the PNID. So this is a 3D layout of a drying installation. And as you can see here, there's an heat pump that's connected to the drying cabinets, the 6 drying cabinets as we saw earlier. In this case, you can just basically see the physical dimensions. You can also see, okay, there's an outside wall, there's some piping go through, which need to be prepared, and all that kind of things. And we can also do that with what I mentioned earlier, a 2D drawing of your building, and we can put in our own equipment. And as you can see here, just to help you with the design of the building, if everything is large enough, all that kind of things. This, of course, will happen over time. It's not that we make something and we share it with you. If we prepare something, we have a review about that. During the time, we come up with these kind of solutions together. So when we have checked everything, we agreed on everything that we have discussed earlier, and then we're going to make an official proposal for you. This basically means an official quotation. But because we have discussed everything, scope, budget, drawings, planning, and most of the time there are not a lot of questions more about it. And of course, at the end, we hope we get an approval from you to continue with the project and start preparing everything for you. So that was the presentation about how we handle custom-made projects within SeedProcessing Holland. I can imagine there are some questions, so I think that's now a good time to share that.
If there are any questions, don't hesitate to ask, even in Thai, like I said also before. Don't feel overwhelmed with this information or that look like a project should be big. It can be also small things. It is not always big. It can be also more simplified, simple, let's say simple things, more or less, in order to fulfill your wishes. If you find a basic machine maybe in our portfolio, but it not completely fit to what you need, that can be also already something, but then you also have to come, the procedure is almost the same, because you have to come to an alignment about your scope. You have to understand exactly what you mean in order to come to a good solution. And it is better to take some time for such process in order to get finally a good result at the end, and not that you are, let's say, investing in machines, you are spending a lot of money, and then finally you not really get what you want, or you're not completely satisfied, maybe 90% but not 100%. And that's important to get that on the table, to get all these information on the table in order to come to a good solution. And like what we also discussed during our lunch when we sit on the table, yeah, there isn't different in let's say, Asian market or Western European market, in financial power, but also in what are the requirements which the company have in order to get the optimal result with the machine. So even when you talk about a certain, let's say, more simplified machine, if I may say so, there will be always maybe something which you say, I would like to make this modification on it because that fit better into what I need. And so don't hesitate about it. And take your time. Think during the season, write down on a piece of paper what you would like to improve so that you can prepare it for the next season. Because at the end of the season, you forgot it. And the next season, you have the same problems. So are there any questions? Anything? Any people who want to ask Mark something? Nobody? Okay, then I would like Mark say thank you for waking up. No, it's not even that early, it's a reasonable time.
No.
And thank you for the presentation. And
yep, no problem.
see you next time.